boys and continue through their shared passion and commitment to the National Center for Atmospheric Research, where Dr. Barron was a postdoc and then later became director from 2008 to 2010. He's always been my boss since I was first hired at Penn State in 1986. Brief furlough in the 2000s from that activity, but he was the director of the visionary Earth System Science Center, really the first in the country to focus on research and education related to studying Earth as a system. He was then Dean of the College of Earth and Mineral Sciences, the Dean of the Jackson School at Texas, Jackson School of Geosciences, the Director of NCAR, President of Florida State, and now the 18th President of Penn State. He's an accomplished paleoclimatologist and extraordinary academic leader. Dr. Barron.
Well, thank you. Hear me okay? What a pleasure to be here to honor someone so incredibly gifted and such a great mentor. I want to begin by the fact that it's very difficult for me to not think about the fact that I was president of two institutions that both had very strong meteorology programs, and Warren applied to both as a grad student. And at Florida State, he had to submit his picture with that application, and he got a letter back saying something about, I think you meant to apply to the HBCU that was in Tallahassee. Now, of course, at this time, a picture was an easy way to look as if you were just wanting to welcome someone, but in fact was also a way to make sure that you control the population. And of course, he comes to Penn State for his degree. I can't tell you how proud of the fact that I am that this Penn State experience worked out the way it did. But this is part of a remarkable story. Well, now I need to tell you about my personal intersection with Warren, so I'm going to toss in some things about myself because it's the only way for me to connect to Warren. I was an undergraduate in geology. I decided oceanography was the frontier. I was working in geophysics and plate tectonics and moving continents around, and all of a sudden I realized that this field was very crowded, that this scientist owned the North Atlantic, and this group of scientists had the Indian Ocean. And this notion of my making a contribution by the details of some plate motion just seemed like it wasn't going to work. So I consciously sat back and said, what comes next after plate tectonics? What will be the next thing that people do? And realized that this was an opportunity to look at climate. How did changing the geography, the distribution of land, the differences in topography, how did that influence the atmospheric and ocean circulation? There was literally no one even thinking about this particular area. Everything about geology was, I see a fossil, a tree, it's a palm tree, it's an alligator, it must have been warm. And to piece together the picture of climate. So I decided this was a good thing to do, and I had the benefit of a fellowship, and I could keep taking classes. So I started to add, this is Miami Oceanographic Labs, I started to add classes in that area. And I developed a committee that included atmospheric scientists and ocean scientists and geologists. It was a very different type of group. And I walked into the office of one of these individuals, Eric Krause, and he said, National Center for Atmospheric Research has a new summer computing program. 6 or 7 grad students are going to be able to go to NCAR and spend half the day working on a scientific problem and half the day trying to understand how it is that you would write code for this new vector-based machine. He said, I want you to apply for one of these fellowships. I looked at him, I nodded my head, and I said, okay, I will do that. I turned around and I was walking out the door, I was rolling my eyes, like, oh my God, I am so busy, I don't know how in the world, there is just absolutely no way that I am going to get a summer fellowship when there are 6 at the National Center for Atmospheric Research as a geologist. This is not happening. But he's on my committee, I'm writing the application, I send it in. So I get one of the fellowships, and I traveled to Boulder in 1976 for the summer to do the problem, to work on a problem. I worked on something extraordinarily complex, that's sarcasm. This was a very simple model of meridional heat transport to try to understand whether in a reduced solar output environment that the Hadley circulation could prevent an ice-covered Earth scenario if you reduce the sun 20%. Okay? Cool thing for a geologist to do. I was enjoying it. It was, you know, basically something that was a good challenge for the geologist. And I had 5 or 6 other students. I'm pretty sure that Kerry Emanuel had Carol next to me. As I recall, he was simulating thunderstorms, and I was looking at what he was doing, and I was comparing it to what I was doing, and I said to myself, I'm out of my league. I don't know what I'm doing here. This is just amazing. I finally went up to the person in charge, Adams. Wasn't Jeannie, I don't think. But anyway, I went up to her and I said, you know, I'm really surprised that you gave me this opportunity. I'm having a wonderful time. I'm spending a lot of time working. As a matter of fact, I work on the weekends, and the next morning, Monday morning, I would come in, and one of the people in the computing division would say, what did you do for the weekend? And I said, well, I really got my doo-doos, just going through that. And the fellow said, you know, you just totally wasted your time. There are mountains out there. There's also, every weekend you go hike someplace and you come back on Monday morning and you can start working on your code again, but you tell me where it is that you've gone. Okay, so I was working hard because I'm behind a bit. So I asked, how did I get to be here? And she said, well, Seymour Cray gave us these fellowships. And he only had one condition. You could give it to 6 atmospheric scientists, but you must give one to an oddball. And now I do want you to think about this for a minute, because it's quite possible, I do a lot of work with donors right now, and it's quite possible, NCAR said, oh, thank God, an oddball applied. We can do what the donor wanted us to do. and they breathed a great sigh of relief that an oddball had applied for this. But nonetheless, I came there as an oddball. All right. So, interesting, wonderful experience, something nobody else in my profession at the time had a chance to think about or do. But one of the things I had with me were my maps of what the world looked like 100 million years ago, 50 million years ago. And I decided, okay, I wonder if there's the potential ever to take these general circulation models that were just emerging and do a simulation where the boundary conditions, lower boundary conditions, were that of the ancient past. And so I made an appointment to talk to Warren, and I brought out my maps, and we had a discussion about this. Now, I can tell you that it's quite possible, with how gifted Warren is, how many medals, all the things he's done, all the people that he's helped, all the service that he provided, that he could have looked at me like the oddball that had come in the doors at NCAR and, you know, thought, okay, you know, I don't know where this guy's coming from. I don't even know whether this map is real. But that's not what he did. What he did was say, yeah, the two of us can work at doing the very first simulation, the general circulation model, with a geography that was different from the present day. Well, 3 or 4 years, I continued to work on simple models. And part of that was incredibly important for me to get more and more understanding of what it is that I was doing. But there was Warren helping me go along, and got a postdoc and a scientist 1 position, was promoted to a scientist 2 position. And in my postgraduate career, Warren Washington was my first boss, my supervisor, but more than anything else, my mentor to help me be successful. There were an amazing number of really kind of interesting challenges and those moments where you wonder how this is going to work. Because even for that initial cray, the first public cray in existence there to be used by the meteorological community, and my experimenting with a different world, we discovered Clausius-Clapeyron was a lookup table once you got above a certain temperature threshold, and it would just reset the number. And I'm sitting there going, what is wrong with this simulation that I cannot get it to change? And I was looking at how warm this past time period was. So here it is, this same sort of opportunity to begin to explore these and have the guidance when you're in a completely different field in the world, to have that guidance and help. There are other times where it's just a psychological moment, because those simulations back then were very short. And you had to be very careful not to make a mistake. I'm not sure Bert probably remembers this as well. But I came to Warren one time as my supervisor, and I said, I really want to have the full seasonal cycle. I'm about to use my entire computer allocation for the year on a single experiment. Now you can imagine the year might not have been great for publications, should that not have turned out so well. I can't remember how many times that I would start it and stop, and start it and stop to make sure everything that was perfect. That statement also makes me realize just how old I've become. You realize that you were doing 30-day simulation and 90-day simulation and hoping that you were capturing December, January, and February, as many other people might remember. Okay, so there's no way a guy studying fossils, earthquakes, magnetic anomalies, gets to enter a field like atmospheric sciences, doing something that nobody else has done, with simulations with general circulation models that we're just developing, if it wasn't for Warren there. And that launched 100 papers in climate modeling, which is quite remarkable. And we got the chance to really explore a lot of different things. All of a sudden, then, the geologic record became the observations by which we compared the model, not what you were building up the whole story from. So this was quite different. And we really discovered some things that in some ways are quite frightening, because we couldn't make the world as warm as the geologic record said it was. In exploring all sorts of feedbacks, in adding components of the ocean, in doing vegetation to see if that's what it was, to keep ratcheting up CO2. And we never quite got the poles warm enough. I feel, especially at that particular time, that in every simulation done by anybody, and after a while there were a lot of simulations, a lot of children and grandchildren out there, my students more prepared than I was to tackle that particular problem. We never over-predicted the warmth of a past geologic time period. We never over-predicted the warmth. We always under-predicted it. Okay, well, so I'd like to go one step further here, and you might think this is a strange thing to say. I'm willing to bet that I would not be president of this institution if it wasn't for Warren Washington. So I'm going to explain that to you. When I was at NCAR, you couldn't write proposals. It was too much competition with the atmospheric community. And I was a youngster, limited amount of resources, and I couldn't have students. Nobody else was doing what I was doing, and I knew that I could write grants to the National Science Foundation, I could build a group, and I could have students, and I could go even further. So at that time, those limitations caused me to leave NCAR, and I went back to Miami as a faculty member, and I hated it. I hated it because my department head, I was in geology and geophysics, my department head was not aggressive, wasn't capturing a sense of the future, and I had been in the midst of a career of capturing the future. So I decided that I had to leave, and I got a call from an individual from Harvard, Dick Holland, who was here, who was helping Penn State create the Earth System Science Center. And I had taken a short course from him, and he said to me, I want you to come give a talk at Penn State. And I said, oh, I'd like to. That'd be great. And he said, and we're going to think about you as the director of the first Earth System Science Center. And I'd seen the advertisement, and I was looking for a job, quietly. I'd seen the advertisement, and I said to myself, wow, Penn State really seems to know what they want to do and how to do it. And this was really exciting. But when that ad came out, I was 5 years out of my PhD. There's no way I'm going to be a director of anything. So I was surprised by Dick Holland's call, and I came up and I interviewed. Many of you know I called my wife after the interview and I said, they're not going to give me this job. This place knows what it's doing. It has its pulse on their finger on the pulse of the future. It's exciting. The minute they hire a director, I'm going to call him or her up on the phone and I'm going to say, you know, I know you got 9 faculty lines that come with your directorship, and I want to be a faculty member. I know I wasn't going to be a director. I want to be a faculty member. And I told my wife this is the perfect place to raise kids, and I'm going to find a way to come to Penn State. Okay, and she was on the other end of the phone going, oh, okay, you sound pretty serious about coming to Penn State. Well, amazingly, they called me up on the phone, and they said, we'd like to offer you the job as being the director of the Earth System Science Center. And I was thrilled, and I took the job, and I came up here, and I thought about it, and finally I turned to John Dutton, and I think Bruce Albrecht, and we were having lunch, and I said, you know, I'm really kind of surprised you offered me the job. And I don't think they were looking for an oddball. I just think, you know, there was some other factor that was in there. And at any rate, so John said, well, and Bruce, might have been Bruce that said it, who was, I think, chairing the search committee. Bruce said, we could have picked someone who was senior, for which we would hope that they would be able to cross disciplinary lines. But that's a risk. Or we could pick the younger person with no management experience, who already was enjoying crossing lines and communicating across disciplines. And we chose that risk over the risk of whether a senior person already in a silo would change things. Well, every opportunity that I can think of in terms of leadership came out of that moment. What would have happened if I'd gone into Warren's office with my maps and talked about what I wanted to do and had a Warren sit there and say, okay, that's really fascinating. I really don't think that's what the resources of an NCAR are all about. You're a little bit, yeah, we needed you as the oddball there for the Seymour Cray Fellowship, but this is a stretch for applying NSF's resources and atmospheric sciences. It could have been very different, and so I thank you. Hopefully, the people that work for me also thank you, but opportunity was born by someone coming into your office which you looked at and decided you were there to help. And those connections with Warren have continued, not just as director, but the many times that I've gone different places, or to have Warren call me up on the phone when I was the director of the Earth System Science Center and said, you met Greg Jenkins when he was at Michigan, right? You were visiting Michigan. I said, yes, I am. He said, you should hire him as your research associate. And I did. And so, here comes an evolution. And this was the interaction with Warren. He was helping me, and he was helping me, helping others. Okay, so I just have a profound sense of gratitude towards Warren, not just because I've come to take on different types of responsibilities, but because I got to do something that was truly pioneering as a scientist, crossing disciplines, watching a whole field of paleoclimate modeling grow, see how paleoclimate modeling contributed to the whole discussion of climate change. And that wouldn't have happened except for those two little examples that I just gave you. Strange Fellowship, that's just opening a door. That was opening a door, and Seymour Craig must have been thinking about that. But have a mentor, have a leader, have such a gifted scientist, be the person that guides you, makes a profound difference. Well, now I would like to end. I don't know, have a clue how I'm doing on time, but I would like to end with a special announcement. So Penn State has a park, Innovation Park. Buildings go up there, we fill them with all sorts of exciting things. Just to give you an example, Building 328 houses the National Weather Service and the Middle Atlantic River Forecast Center. So I'm pleased to say that Warren and Mary have to come back, because a very short time ago, I had the agreement to name Building 328 after Warren Washington. Well, I have to tell you, I told people it's Innovation Park and the buildings are numbered. We need to name these buildings after innovators. And I said this to the deans. Lee in the College of Earth and Mineral Sciences said, we have the perfect person to propose to name the first one of the buildings that will be named the Innovation Park. And the folks that helped build this building for Penn State are just thrilled, and they would like there for a ceremony honoring your pioneering career and all that you've done. I just can't tell you how excited they were about it. I thought, okay, this will be interesting, and they went, okay, this is wonderful. We're incredibly proud of it. Thank you for all that you've done for so many people, but for me personally. Thank you.